Hello and welcome to this introductory webinar on personal impact to help you think about why personal impact is so important and to think about what action you may need to take for your career. I'm Joanna Gaudoin. I run Inside Out Image, and all the work I do helps individuals to progress their careers and companies to improve their performance by helping their people to fulfill their potential. Most of the work I do is focused on developing people's personal impact and their relationship management skills. In other words, how they communicate themselves and engage with other people in every professional scenario. Clearly, personal impact is foundational to every work situation, and this is what we're going to be focusing on today. I work with clients one-to-one. I run masterclasses and workshops in companies and other organisations, and I also speak at events, whether those be conferences or networking events. Many of the people I work with are very bright, very technical, have a lot of knowledge. It's these other skills they need as they move through their careers. So what we're going to cover today focuses on two topics. Firstly, why professional relationships matter so much, and the psychology behind them and how this relates to personal impact. And then I'm going to give you a brief overview of the tools that really make a difference to personal impact. So let's get started with why these relationships matter and the psychology behind them. So here we have a picture of some lovely islands. Unfortunately, this can't be us at work. It's rare we have a day where we don't have to interact with others, whether that be in person, on phone, by email, or virtual call. There are lots of ways in which we communicate with people, whether they be internal people and/or external people. We are rarely working in isolation. So the picture to keep in mind instead is rather this one, interrelatedness. So thinking about yourself at the centre of a web of different connections and people that you are interacting with on a daily basis, a weekly basis, that's going to vary. But thinking about those people both internally, so people in other departments, your own team, more senior people, peers, more junior people, and of course those people externally, whether they be clients, customers, prospective clients or customers, other partners, suppliers. So every day, who are you interacting with? Who's impacted by you on a daily, weekly or monthly basis? Soft skills, I don't particularly like this term as I think it makes them sound like they don't matter and that they're easy. But soft skills is everything that's not about your hard technical skills and knowledge. And this was recognised as important even in the last century. So some research was done in an engineering company, and clearly in an engineering company you need to have a lot of knowledge and expertise. It was looked at why one company was outperforming the other in terms of revenue and profit. And what that research found was that just 15% of that increased financial success was due to that company having enhanced technical knowledge. 85% was due to the personality of the people, the ability to lead and build relationships. So whether that be internally or with external clients as well. So I think that's quite telling that in such a technically based company, the people aspect, the soft skills was so important. And that's because we are not solely logical people. We are also emotional people, and we do make decisions based on those we interact with. If you just think about at work, maybe there's another function, another department that you have to regularly interact with. Who do you choose who to call in that department if there's a choice of several? It's probably the person you connect best with and is most likely to get the job done for you and in a good way. So it's not just about the what, it's about the how. There is an assumption, particularly if you work in a large organisation, that there's a strong technical baseline. For example, if you work in a large law firm, there will be an assumption that you know the law, you have expertise there. So that is there. The question is, what else can you offer? And that's as a company, as an organisation, as a business, but equally as an individual. What else are you offering your organisation? If you've ever heard me talk about networking, you will have heard me dwell on this point quite a lot, but there are three elements that are foundational to great professional relationships. The first one is getting yourself known. So how well known are you? You're probably well known amongst your team, your close colleagues, but actually, who else knows you? Who else needs to know you, both internally and externally? So from an internal perspective, more senior people will make decisions about your career, whether it's what projects you're on, which clients you get given, whether you progress. So who do you need to know? Externally, who needs to know you around the sector? Who needs to know you as an expert? The second point is being liked. And liked doesn't mean being people pleasing, but it means having the ability to connect with others and build rapport, showing a bit of human interest in them, not just talking about the direct work topic. How good are you at doing that with the people you interact with? And thirdly, trust. So trust for me is two-sided. There's personal trust, which usually comes if you like somebody, so someone's not going to walk off with your laptop bag if you leave it with them. And then there's professional trust. Do you come across as an expert in what you say you're an expert in? How well are you building that credibility with people? And of course, you can't be wholly responsible for trust. Some people take longer to trust others, and they may need to experience more of your work before they fully trust you. So thinking about how well you are known, liked, and trusted in your professional environment is absolutely key to building great professional relationships. When we're communicating to others, we are continually projecting to others. We can't project nothing. People are always going to gather some sort of impression from us, whether that's a very strong one or actually a weak one. They will take something away. They will form that perception. So there's a lot of subliminal messaging that takes place to help them form this perception. Now, of course, we can't be entirely responsible for somebody's perception. That is affected by a lot of other things, such as their life experiences. Have they met somebody that looks like us before? So therefore, they're projecting that person's behavior onto us. All of their experience and what's in their head does affect that perception. But we do need to be thinking about what we're projecting to others to help us build successful relationships. There are two time factors to consider. So there's the much talked about first impression that you will have heard about. So when somebody first meets us, what are they thinking? And that is less than 10 seconds. There's a lot of research in this area, but Harvard University always comes up with it's definitely less than 10 seconds to make an impression on somebody. And then there's the longer term, how we continually building our credibility with people, and hopefully if that impression's been a good one, to build on it over time. So relationships are of course built over time, they're not built in one instance. Of course, first impressions always matter, but they're going to matter even more when there's a situation where someone needs to make a quick decision. So I give the example of an interview. Someone is going to give you that interview, the chance, whether you progress beyond that. A lot of the first impression is going to play a role in that. Likewise, if you're going to a pitch meeting or if you're meeting somebody for the first time at networking. So it's not impossible to reverse a negative first impression, but certainly in those sorts of instances, you may not get a second opportunity. So it's important to think about the impact you are having on others, both in the short and longer term. Likewise, it is possible if you made a positive first impression over time for that to reverse as well. So keeping those two things in mind is pivotal. Linked to this is your personal brand. And what I mean by this is, what do people think of when they think of you? If they were talking about you to somebody else, what words would they use to describe you that weren't about your technical ability, but about who you are and how you behave and interact with people? I often get my clients to come up with 3 words that they would like people to describe them as. There's a bit of a process behind that we go into to work out what those 3 words are. that will then help them consider whether their actions and behaviour support those 3 words. Are they consistent with their personal brand? And that is why you see the image of a metronome here, because consistency is absolutely key with your personal brand. People need to know what to expect of you, what you're going to be like. People with a strong personal brand do perform much better at work because people know what they're getting, and it helps you to communicate clearly who you are and what you offer. So there's a little bit about the psychology behind relationships and personal impact. I now want to look at what are the actual tools we have that make a real difference to our everyday personal impact. So what we're doing here is filling in that question mark that we looked at earlier around the subliminal messaging. So what is impacting all that messaging that helps our projection become a perception for somebody else? And there are, in fact, 3 main areas affecting a first impression. So if we go back to thinking about meeting somebody in person, that large blue chunk that you see here is all the visual aspects. So that's the appearance and the body language. Those haven't been split out, but certainly in person, they are very, very important. The next segment, the orange, is your voice. So it's not what you say, but it's how you are saying it. And we're going to look at some of the detail behind that. And the small grey part is actually what you are saying. Now this is small because if you think about it, that first impression is in less than 10 seconds. So you don't get a chance to say very much. So that's part of the reason. But I think it's quite striking that 93% of factors that affect a first impression are nothing to do with what you say. Remember, this demonstrates the percentages if you're meeting somebody in person. If, of course, you're on the phone, then that's going to change because there's no visual aspect there. So that's important to consider. So to look at the first element, appearance. So 2 aspects here to think about that I'm just going to give you very top line. Firstly is appropriateness. What's appropriate for what you're doing on any given day? What's the right dress code? How are other people going to be dressed? What's the environment? What's the expectation of you? That is more important than ever because in the last 20, 30 years, that has evolved a lot. 30 years ago, everybody would have been in a suit in a lot of professional environments. That's no longer the case, so there's more judgment involved. Secondly, what suits you? What do you look good in? What do you feel good in? Because those things make a difference to how you come across. If you don't feel like you look good in something, you don't feel confident, that's going to affect your behaviour as well. Secondly, to look about this body language element, there are 5 key elements, I think, here. Not to say there aren't others, but I think there are 5 that really need focus. And the first one is posture. And posture is important because that can set the tone from even quite a distance. If you see somebody coming into the room, you can get a feeling for what they might be like or their state of mind by what they look like from a posture perspective. So are they walking up straight? Are they looking confident, or are they more hunched and less confident? Also linked to that, how are they moving? Are they moving in a dynamic way or less so? So posture is a key element to consider even when you're virtually meeting people online as well. So how are you sitting in your chair? What's your head position like? In a face-to-face meeting, how much of your space are you owning? How are you sitting upright in that chair? How are you looking at people across the table? Secondly, expressions. These are quite hard because very often they give away what we're really thinking. So they can convey feelings. So not facts. So words convey facts, expressions often convey what we're actually feeling. So if you know that you're a really expressive person, you might need to be careful here in thinking about what you're conveying. Thirdly, mannerisms. Do you have any mannerisms that are distracting to other people, that fundamentally they're focusing on your mannerism, not what you're actually saying? So whether that be fiddling with your hair, fiddling with coins in your pocket, if you've got some pockets, what is that that could be a massive distraction from what you are saying to others? Fourthly, gestures. Do you use those powerfully and well to convey what you're saying? The research shows that people's engagement increases massively when you're speaking if you also use gestures, because as well as your voice, you've got a little bit of movement. But again, using them in an appropriate way is really important, because if you overuse them, it can be distracting. And the position of your hands is also important, because very often above your shoulders can look angry. Of course, with all these elements, there are big cultural differences, and it's important to think about these if you are going to an environment where the culture is very different. The final element I want to cover here is eye contact. How good are you at looking people in the eye when you're speaking to them? Ideally, you should be looking them in the eye around 70% of the time. So using that as a guideline and then maybe flexing it slightly depending on the other person. That helps people to feel connected if you are looking at them. So they are the key elements of body language. An estimate is that in a meeting room scenario, when you're in person, 60 to 70% of the communication is actually through body language rather than the words. So really important to be thinking about your own body language, what you're communicating to other people, as well as observing others, because of course that can give things away that are useful. For instance, if somebody that you're really trying to engage with in a meeting, perhaps you need to influence them, is looking bored and disengaged, then you need to change something to change their state. So really important to use body language skills from those two perspectives. Voice. So I said I'd look at some more elements behind voice, and I've got 4 for you here. The first one is volume. So can people actually hear you? Are you speaking at a volume that's audible? Of course, whether that's in person or on the phone or on a video call. Is that the right level? Is it too loud? Are you shouting at people too much? So really thinking about what's your natural voice level and how might I need to vary that for different scenarios. The second element is pace, and this is the element that I think is hardest for people. Many of the more senior people that I work with still struggle with this. Usually they're speaking too quickly. Fundamentally, if someone's speaking too quickly, people can't engage with that, and they will only ask for you to repeat it probably once, twice at best. So if they don't understand, that's not much good. What we need to remember with pace is that when we're talking about something, communicating information, whether that be formal presentation, informal presentation, or in a conversation, often what we're saying might not be new for us, but it's probably new for the person or people listening. So thinking about what speed do we need to speak at? Equally, too slow can show that we're a bit disengaged or can even convey that we're a bit depressed. So thinking clearly about what that pace needs to be for what we're communicating. Thirdly is enunciation. So how clearly we are speaking to people. Are we saying the words fully? Are we making sure they're not running into one another? This is particularly important if we are speaking to people where our language isn't their language first. So they may struggle to keep up. So we need to think about how clearly we're talking. Likewise, on the phone or on video calls, this is going to be important as well, because you're missing some of the other cues. Lastly, inflection and pitch. Monotone is voted as one of the factors that least impacts people. So if you're talking in a monotone way, people are going to switch off a little bit. So how can you think about your inflection and pitch? How can you vary your voice so that people stay engaged? So thinking about those 4 aspects of your voice, which do you need to work most on and in which scenarios is important to consider. I want to finish up by getting you to think about the scenarios where you are interacting with other people and how you are coming across in those. So think about the consistency I talked about earlier. So if somebody meets you at a networking meeting or a pitch meeting or another introductory meeting, do they go and look at you on LinkedIn and get a feeling you're the same person there? Is your LinkedIn profile consistent with that? Remember, LinkedIn is effectively your shop window online. Equally, are you coming across in the same way online in other ways, so via email, and also if people Google you, what are they finding? When they see you on a video call or they're messaging you internally, speaking to you on the phone, does that all tie up with the person you are everywhere else? So really think about, where are you visible? What touch points do you have with people? And what do you need to consider for your personal impact? So my question now, after this short session, is what next for you? What do you need to be thinking about? Where do you need to develop? What do you need to consider? If you haven't received my series, The 9 Neglected Skills Needed for Career Success, you can request that on my website at this link. That looks at 9 key skills that you need for career success. There's a page for each one, so there are lots of tips and other advice and guidance there. Do connect with me on LinkedIn, because as well as putting articles on my website, I also put them on LinkedIn as well and post lots of other helpful and informative content there. If you have questions or you want to book a 30-minute career booster conversation with me, as you've heard today, and perhaps it's provoked some thought, then do email me. I'm always happy to answer your questions and to have more of a chat with you about your situation and where you're at. So my email address is there. It's also on my website, or you can use the content form to get in touch and ask me what you need to. But my question to you is, what are you going to do, and who are you going to ask to support you? Whether that is an expert like me or whether it's someone else, who's going to keep you accountable for making some positive change? So thank you very much for listening today. I appreciate your time, and I hope you've got something from this. And do be in touch if you have questions. Thank you.